Welcome to session 2. This is where we talk about orientation. So the orientation of a home basically refers to its aspect really. So it might be oriented towards the road, towards the view, towards north. Orientation is really important around because of energy efficiency, but also the livability of a home. You could have the world's most energy efficient orientation, but really lose the advantage of a view, which means it's not such a nice home to live in. So there's always a degree of compromise around this. But luckily, most of the thinking around orientation happens in a brief with a builder initially, a designer at Green Homes, and a client essentially. So that conversation will usually have occurred by the time the final plan makes it to site. And those sorts of, the orientation, the aspect will be pretty much set in stone, and it's just a matter of building the plans. But you might be wondering, well, why have they put the kitchen on this side? Why are those rooms here? Well, that's what this session's about. Broadly speaking, if you have a requirement for heating in winter, then that means you should design a home to get sun in as much as possible in winter to do the heating for free. Every square metre of sun carries with it about 1,000 watts of energy. Now, if you think of 1,000 watts of energy, that's a personal heater that sits under a desk. So if that's happening for free all the time, that's quite a warming influence on the home. So your orientation, your perfect orientation for what they would call a passive solar passive home, meaning you don't have to do anything and the sun's coming in, is that it would be long and facing north, long on terms of the east-west axis and facing north. You've also got to watch out for things like western sun, particularly in warmer climates, of course, but that, from 2 o'clock in the afternoon through summer, your house can just be absolutely pounded with sun as hot as it gets all year. So orientation also starts to move into shading, which we'll cover off in a session later on. But again, it's an important point to consider when you're designing the home. There's some discussion about which rooms occur on which side of the house. So if you're going to have sun streaming into a room, do you want that to be the bedroom or the kitchen or the bathroom, or how are you going to take advantage of that heat? Well, that really comes down to the rooms that you're going to be in the most time at the time that the sun's coming in. So whilst it's kind of nice to have sun flowing into a bedroom, it is a bit of a wasted opportunity because you're heating a room that you're not actually in. So really, it would make no sense to have warm bedrooms, but have to have the heating running in the living room and the kitchen. When the kids come home from school, you're running heat there to keep your house warm. So there's quite a bit of thought that goes into what rooms go on which particular part of a house. If you're looking at building to maximise the breeze, it's the same kind of conversation. Why would you put all your bedrooms on the side with the dominant breeze and have the windows shut and be stifling around the back, with the fans running to try and stay a little bit cool? One of your tasks for this session is to indicate which is the best passive solar plan. Now, it's a bit tricky because, as we mentioned before, there's always a bit of a compromise. But what you need to think about is how much am I taking advantage of the local conditions for free? And am I making the most of those opportunities in terms of the livability of that home? So am I heating areas that I'm spending most time in for free as much as possible? And in terms of cooling, it's the same. Am I providing as much opportunity as possible for people to be comfortable without having to switch something on? You're also going to have to indicate which is the best option, best plan for passive cooling. And that's a little bit different. In most of the climate zones in Australia, thermal mass can be really useful. It can be really unuseful in northern Australia where it's hot and humid. Or even just hot, you can get it wrong. So you haven't done the thermal mass part of the training yet, you're doing this module early. But you need to understand that using heavy materials in northern hotter climates can be really problematic. And if you think about that, that means you've had a hot day, the sea breezes come up in the evening, you've got cooling down overnight, but you've got all these hot bricks in the house just radiating heat, these Besser blocks just keeping the place warm. Whereas if you had thin materials and light construction, it would cool down really quickly and you would have, be much more comfortable earlier. So it's a bit tricky, we'll get into more of that later, but when you look at the plans that you need to select from in the north, think about that. The other thing you need to think about is how are you excluding the sun? If you're in the south and you're in an environment where you have to heat in winter, you want to bring that sun in. For a lot of northern Australia though, you absolutely want to keep it out. The other thing that is important in hot climates is the colour of roofs and the sort of the material selection you make. Dark roofs don't make much sense up north or in any environment where you're trying to keep the heat out. That's not necessarily on the plan, but it is something that you need to know. And the other thing is in terms of livability and passive cooling design, you'd be hoping to have sort of indoor outdoor areas and areas where air can move and heat can dissipate quickly.